I was driving along a deserted road on a long-distance sales trip. It was dark and raining. A thunderstorm rumbled all around me. I came to a halt at a fork in the road. On the ground I saw 2 road signs. One gave information on the direction I was heading. The other said, "Private road, keep out." After a short while driving, my eyes began to feel heavy as I peered through the rain-beaten windscreen. Then all of a sudden, a tall hooded figure appeared, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed my brakes on hard and came to a halt, just inches away from where the figure stood. For a second I closed my eyes with relief that I hadn't hit him, then rushed out the car into the pouring rain. I looked all around, but there was no sign of the figure. Then out of the darkness of the tall swaying trees on either side of the road, I began to hear strange eerie sounds, haunting and tormenting. Shaken by the sounds, I anxiously made my way back to the car and drove away. But the haunting sounds seemed to follow, echoing all around me. As I drove on, I could see figures, people emerging from the trees, men, women and children. They wore strange masks, carrying lanterns. They converged in the middle of the road and walked slowly, eerily behind me, following in the direction of my car. I watched them in my rearview mirror slowly disappear as my car moved further away. After about half a mile driving, the rain stopped and a dense mist entwined itself all around me. Then my car came to a shuddering halt. Then, out of the mist, like a corpse risen from the grave, appeared a tall, dark house. I got out of the car and stood looking at it through wrought iron gates. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was telling me not to go in there. But what choice did I have? My car wouldn't start and I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. The old wooden door unexpectedly creaked open as I knocked. I walked tentatively inside. "Hello?" Nobody answered, but as I stood in the grand hallway, the large wooden door slammed shut behind me. The light was dim, and a whistling wind blew throughout the house. To the left of the hallway was a door. I walked over to it and slowly turned the handle. As I entered the room, a cackling wood fire was burning in a large brick fireplace, causing flickering shadows to dance along the walls. I then noticed the figure of an old man sitting in an armchair, staring into the flames of the fire. I was relieved to find someone home, but as I approached the chair, the old man turned to me quickly with a startled look upon his face and evaporated into thin air. I fell backwards with a start and scrambled to leave the room, closing the door behind me. Whilst gathering my senses, I heard the ticking of a grandfather clock coming from down the hall. I slowly walked towards it. I stood hypnotized by the large pendulum swaying back and forth. Then the ticking stopped, and the clock began to chime for midnight. The chime of the clock was loud, almost deafening. Then the lights around the house began to flicker on and off. In a panic, I ran to the entrance door and turned the handle, but it wouldn't open. I tried again with all my strength, but it still would not budge. Then the lights stopped flickering. I turned from the door and looked around the dim light of the house. The footsteps I heard were coming from above me, so I slowly made my way up the stairs. When I reached the top, I heard the sound of a child's laughter. I looked down the long corridor to my left and saw a young boy wearing clothes from a bygone age, including a flat cap. I called out to the boy and began to walk towards him, but he fled into one of the rooms, closing the door behind him. When I reached the door, I turned the handle slowly before walking inside, and as I did, the door slammed shut behind me. The room was in total darkness. I felt inside my pocket for a box of matches, then holding it aloft in front of me, I struck a match. Instantly, the light revealed the gruesome, wicked face of an old woman staring back at me. I let out a gasp of horror, and as the light of my match went out, the sound of the cackling laughter echoed all around me, and in the darkness numerous hands reached out, grabbing at my clothes, turning me this way and that. Then it suddenly stopped, and the door swung open. I rushed out of the room and stood in the long corridor. I began to hear whispering voices. I looked left and right to see where they were coming from. Then I noticed above me dark shadows crawling eerily along the walls and ceiling towards me. Get out! Get out!
Get out!
I ran towards the stairs, but in front of me stood a young woman. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and a noose around her neck. But before I could say a word, she climbed the balcony and jumped. The lights again began to flicker and doors began to slam open and shut. I ran down the stairs and looked up at the woman hanging from her neck. Then the clock chimed just once, and everything went silent. Not long after, the front door opened by itself. After a second's pause, I ran to my car and tried the engine. Unbelievably, it started, and I drove away as fast as I could. But as I stared into my rearview mirror, I saw the group of people wearing masks and carrying lanterns, staring and watching me go. I returned to the house with the police the following morning, but in the daylight it looked different, as if no one had occupied it for years. All the windows were boarded up, and as the police broke inside, it was completely empty. No furniture, no grandfather clock, and no young woman hanging by her neck. Happy Halloween.